The Battle of Arrakis has finally arrived after a bit of a delay, but even if it does fall a little short on some setbacks.
Those were up, and they did.
We're smart, and my...
He told me enough.
No, I.
Here's Chuck.
Hey everyone, it's Don G. Corleone here, and I'm here with a brand new movie review. And this movie review is going to be for a new release that has just come out today. And it's for one that was supposed to come out last year, but the actors' strike ruined that chance from happening, so it got bumped to this year. This weekend. And it was for a follow-up to a 2021 film. And that film is going to be for none other than Denis Villeneuve's new project, the follow-up to his 2021 breakout hit Dune, Part 1, Dune, Part 2. And what's the plot of this movie? Well, this one, Paul Atreides unite... We all know how Part 1 ended. Paul Atreides united with Shani and the Freemen, and they're now on a warpath of revenge against the conspirators who destroyed his family. Now facing a choice between the love of his life and the fate of the known universe, he endeavors to prevent a terrible future only he can foresee. So, yeah. So, guess, how was this made? Well, we all know when Dune Part 1 released, people weren't expecting it to be a hit, but, yeah, it was like when this film came out, no one was expecting it to be a hit. And then it released on October 20... one of the last weekends of October 2021. It turned out to be a surprise hit for a theaters and streaming release because it was released on both theaters and HBO Max because the pandemic was still kind of really strong around then, even if the theaters were starting to reopen. It did pretty good, so a few days later on October 26, 2021, Legendary finally greenlit Dune Part 2. And a spokesperson for the company was stating that they would have not gotten to the point without the vision of Denis Villeneuve and the amazing work of the talented crew, the writers, the stellar cast, the people of Warner Brothers, and of course, even the fans. So they decided to do Dune Part 2. And production work occurred back-to-back with the first film, and Villeneuve and his wife even took a flight to Budapest in order to begin pre-production work. Then a key point in negotiating prior to greenlighting sequels is ensuring the sequel to have an exclusive window where it would be only shown theatrically this time. And Legendary Warner Bros. Are agreeing to give Dune Part 2 a 45-day window before it be available through their channels. And Villeneuve said the theatrical exclusivity was a non-negotiable condition, and that the theatrical experience was at the very heart of cinematic language for Denis Villeneuve himself. Then Dune Part 2 was greenlit. Villeneuve had said his concern was to complete filming as soon as possible, and the earliest he was going to start was last quarter 2022. But he noted production would be facilitated to the work already established with the first film, and would help expedite production. So then, a year later, in March 2022, some new cast members were added, which were Florence Pugh and Austin Butler, were reported to be in talks to star in the film as Princess Orlun and Harkonnen, Hierfried Rada. And Butler was offered the role while having coffee with Villeneuve without needing to audition, so he trained for 4 months in Budapest and used a fitness regimen made by the ex-Navy SEALs member. Then Villeneuve described the performance was a cross between a psychopath killer, Olympic swordmaster, a snake, and Mick Jagger. And Butler even researched past cultures to fell-bred brutality and took inspiration from various animals, such as sharks and snakes. Even imitated Stellan Skarsgård's voice as the Baron. They felt Fed would be influenced by the Baron due to growing up with him. Then some more other cast members around the rest of the year were announced, like Christopher Walken, Lea Seydoux. Then by January 2023, Tim Blake Nelson was added to the cast. And according to the London's film premiere in February 2024, Anya Taylor-Joy confirmed that she got cast in the film as well. And it was a bit of a surprise announcement. So anyway, after the movie was shot and originally planned for release in 2023, but it didn't. But now it's finally been released this weekend. Actually, it wasn't the only delay. It was going to be released on October 20th, 2023. Then it got bumped to November 17, 2023, moved forward 2 weeks to November 3rd, 2023, then originally March 15, 2024, but then the strikes thankfully got resolved, so it's now released today on March 1st, 2024. But it had its world premiere in London on February 15, 2024 last month. And guess what, guys? How has the reactions been? It got some even more critical acclaim, surprisingly, than the first film did. Well, yeah. And it's predicted to be a pretty big box office this weekend. I mean, it's apparently made $12 million in its Thursday night previews. So anyway, how was my reaction? Well, y'all remember when part one came out and I reviewed it in October 2021 during the time my channel was getting more and more popular. I saw the trailers for that one, and I didn't read the books, but I thought it looked interesting and enjoyable because of all the cast members in it, and I liked Denis Villeneuve as a director. Then saw the film, and I gave it a 9 out of 10, and that was also for the Thursday night showing. Yeah, like with Denis Villeneuve, I enjoyed Prisoners, I enjoyed Sicario, I enjoyed Blade Runner 2049. I personally think Blade 2049 is his #1 best movie, and I enjoyed Dune Part 1. I was more excited a sequel was going to be happening. Then I was more and more hyped. And then the trouble called the actor's strike happened. And did try to have faith this would not get delayed. Sadly, near the end of last summer, that exactly happened. And y'all remember I got too mad about it. And originally I didn't want to see the film after that. That incident. But then I changed my mind. Like, seriously, and the reason why was because many delayed releases that happened from the pandemic all turned out to be big letdowns. So I didn't want to waste more months of my life getting hyped over a film that was probably not going to be that great. But then I saw last year's Wonka. I surprisingly enjoyed it, and that renewed my interest in seeing and reviewing Dune Part 2. So yeah, that's why I changed my mind. I'm actually reviewing the film after all. For those of you who are wondering, why are you reviewing this and seeing it anyway? If I almost backed out last year, like, I just said that. That's why you're wondering. Anyways, guys, how was the film? Well, it was good. But if I'm going to be honest, guys, I don't think this was better than Part 1. And no, it's not because it was delayed. Because of actual reasons. No, it's not going to be a rant. It's still going to be a positive review. But I think there's plenty of better Denis Villeneuve films than this. Blade Runner 2049 is better than this. Prisoners is better than this. Sicario is better than this. Even Dune Part 1 I thought was better than this. And that's going to be controversial. But first, let's say the good things. So, Dune Part 2, yeah, it's everything you would want for a sequel because it's bigger and bolder than its predecessor. And it concludes that first movie as you keep kind of siding with Paul. The movie has more action scenes, explosions, and violence than the first film, keeps the tone of the world building, and grounded character moments. And direction and writing of the movie is definitely top-notch, and it's satisfying for the viewer. The film does create tension in the beginning, and it peaks strongly towards the end, so there's not really much pacing issues. So yeah, and since this is the other half of the entire story, Dune Part 2 predictably picks up from where the first one ended. Because Atreides' house suffered betrayal from the Emperor himself, got annihilated from Arrakis by the evil forces of Harkonnen that were led by Brother Baron Vladimir, and Paul Atreides united with Shani and the Freeman army that were led by Stuggar, while they were seeking revenge against the conspirators that destroyed his family. Like, from the opening scenes of the final frame, Dune Part 2, its visual narrative tour de force, and Villeneuve's meticulous attention to detail transforms every pixel into a work of art, creates a cinematic experience that transcends mere entertainment. It's a journey that takes audience to distant realms, seamlessly bleeding broad archetypes with profound ideas, making every moment a visual and intellectual feast. And this part even, focuses on the world of does often focus on the world of Freemans, their obsession with the legend of Lisa Agad, Javier Bardem's portrayal of Stuggar, Freeman blinded by faith in one of the highlights of the epic, And Timothy Chalamet, who also shines as Paul Atreides in trying to live up to the expectations of the prophecy. And of course, with the newcomers, you got some newcomers there. You got Austin Butler, you got Florence Pugh, you got Christopher Walken. Butler and Pugh actually are definitely fresh entry in a star-studded franchise as well. And how does the movie start? So be warned, guys. This is going to have a bit of spoilers. So if you have not seen the movie yet, click off the review because there's going to be some spoilers here. Like where we start the movie, we actually start off with Princess Ireland, who's journaling that Paul Atreides is still alive, and her father, the Emperor Shaddam IV, is dispirited because from promoting the fall of House Atreides. And meanwhile, we cut back to Paul and Lady Jessica. They're en route to Shias Tabir on Arrakis with Stilgar's Freeman troop. They overcome a Harkonnen ambush, and have to siege suspicions. Then when they get back to their base, there's suspicion about Jessica and Paul being spies. But there's some Freemen that have faith in them, some don't. They believe the prophecy of a mother's son bringing perspective to Arrakis. And Stilgar informs Jessica that the Reverend Mother's dying, and convinces Jessica to replace her by drinking this thing called the Water of Life, and that's a poison fatal for males and the untrained. Then she transmutes the poison. By doing so, she survives, and she inherits the memories of every female ancestor in her genetic lineage. And unbeknownst to anyone but her and Paul, like Jessica is actually pregnant as well with Paul's sister. And the Water of Life prematurely awakens the daughter's mind before birth. Then Jessica also has spiritual conversations with Lily in her womb, and also believes that those in North Arrakis would be convinced first of the prophecy. It especially includes... Meanwhile, with the whole prophecy debates going on, Ginny and this other friend of hers that's named Shishakil, they think the prophecy is false. Then of course, though, Paul makes a speech about that he's not seeking power and wants to only fight alongside them. And then, of course, starts having Jenny to finally start developing his respect for him. And that's where the film pretty much goes from there. Like, the acting in this movie was definitely good, and the chemistry definitely still carries over on this film. And I definitely like Timothy Chalamet as Zendaya in this film. Even though sometimes their performances didn't grip me for the emotional parts here. Even if there's times when you do kind of connect to them, even if the moments do feel a little stretched in times, but yeah, we actually do get to see more Chani in this film, since that was a criticism for a lot of people who saw the first one. We never really saw much of Chani. And visually, the film is definitely spectacular, and a lot of attention to the details is definitely the display. And obviously, there's definitely a lot of VFX used to obtain 98% of the scenes, but it definitely feels natural. It doesn't feel overly out of place, and that especially includes the effects for the giant worms as well. The effects for the worms look very great. Yeah, very great design of the worms. And the direction and writing of the movie is top-notch and satisfying for the viewer. The movie does create tension in the beginning, and it peaks strong towards the end as well. When it comes to story-wise stuff, story-wise, the movie succeeds in the message it tries to deliver, especially because of the cast and their strong performances. Throughout most of the film, you're worried about Paul's journey of becoming the chosen Jihad Messiah, and it definitely wouldn't be believable at all, though, but given the main actor's young age. But this was all done very well, and Timothy Chalamet really shifted his character's personality in a drastic way, and it made him seem like this totally different person at the end. This is the kind of leader that the masses would follow. It's because of the cred and the rest of the cast. They generally seem to worship up and uplift the character to power. Honestly, ever since Dune Part 1 and Wonka, Timothy Chalamet really has a career ahead of him. I really cannot wait to see what other stuff this guy does in the future. And the romance between Paul and Chani, it's definitely nice. It's not over cringy. It's not Twilight-like or at all. It's not like Twilight cringe. It's actually done very well and definitely done very tolerable. And Stilgar is definitely a nice little touch of humor in the film to prevent the movie from being a little boring. And the transformation of Paul's mother, Lady Jessica, it's definitely interesting. And the communication between Lady Jessica and her daughter was definitely compelling enough, even if it would seem a little weird on camera, but they managed to really make it work here. And And it's nice little concept about how the unborn daughter is even trying to take a part of the future. So that's a pretty nice concept here. So so after like so after Paul and Chani kind of start to warm up to each other a little more, and in Paul's speech, then Paul starts to embrace Freeman ways. He learns their language. And then he passes a bunch of tests that Freeman put him on, like riding on a sandworm. Then starts to form more of a romantic relationship with Chani. Then he becomes a Fennekin fighter, and he assists raids on Hardican spice harvesters, and he earns the Freeman nicknames Muad'Dib and the Soul. Now Jessica, meanwhile, still spiritually guides his ascent, thereby fuels the religion in which she has become prominent. Then Rabin, whose grips on spice production had been loosening, on the other hand, meanwhile Rabin intensified his raids on the Freeman to please his uncle, which is, of course, the Baron Vladimir Harkonnen, which is Stellan Skarsgård's character. So the Baron then decides to demote Rabin. He demotes Rabin because he failed to stop Freeman revolts, and instead has his psychotic murderous younger nephew, who is Austin Butler's character, Feed Ratha, as sent to the Reverend Mother Geismonian, and seduces Fed to secure his genes should Paul's bloodline be unsalvageable. And honestly, Austin Butler's performance I thought was actually great here. This is the same guy who played in 2022's hit Elvis, and actually did a good job portraying Elvis Presley in that film. And here, he actually did well. His design was very creepy. His voice was very creepy. His scenes were very creepy. His fight scenes in the arena actually felt very creepy. But yeah, they actually did very well done, intimidating performance here. And I actually really liked how he played his character. He actually made him feel like a legitimate threat. And then we see, after we get introduced to Austin Butler's character, we cut back to Jessica, who has now completed her religious quest in the north, and now traveled south to unite with the fundamentalists there. And then, of course, however, though, Paul is starting to fear a holy war is going to happen if he does go south as a messiah. So he remains in the north, where he decides to reunite with with Josh Brolin's character from Part 1, Gurney Halleck, and after Paul had some visions of Chani dying or dehydrating or boiling to death in the sun or the deserts, we find out that Gurney Halleck joined a bunch of spice smugglers after Atreus' downfall in the first Psalm, and here Gurney leads Paul to House Atreus' hidden atomic warheads. And then, of course, more troops attack. Then he kills Chinese friend Shockley, and the survivors, especially Paul, have to now go south. And then Jessica learns the water of life was this liquid from a sandworm once that sandworm drowned it. So then after they get south, Paul then decides to consume the water of life, but that's against Shani's wishes, though. Then, of course, Paul goes in a coma, goes unconscious. Then Chani reawakens him. And then Paul now has a clearer sense of the past and the future. And he now sees a vision, and through the vision we find out apparently the Baron was actually his grandfather. Because we actually do cut to Jessica as an infant, and that's how it's a nice little twist there. We find out the Baron is actually his grandfather the whole time. And yeah, we get more action, like I said, and the action is definitely masterful, even if it does slightly lack some more action like I was kind of expecting it to have. The choreography is definitely still fantastic. The sound design is easily also, though, the best of all of them. It's breathtaking with the sound design because it proves it definitely makes it very epic sound for a 2020s film. The score doesn't take much part of the movie, as what the score from Dune does, but it's still amazingly good. The score feels darker, feels more raw, and it makes some of the elements of the movie more threatening. And of course, the visual brilliance literally elevates every aspect of the film. And the scenes and that parts of the scenes, they make it feel as if the characters are immersed in the environment, rather than just placed against a green screen here. And I like the portrayal of the time passing through Paul's changing eyes. We all know, as we see in the film, the Freeman's eyes are blue. And Paul, at first Paul's aren't, but as the movie progresses, his eyes start to get more blue. And the longer he stays, the bluer his eyes get. So that's a really nice effect right there. Shows how he's becoming more like the Freeman. And how lively it is. and the plot progresses at a measured pace. It does remain engaging. It draws attention from the slowness and has more. And it still does get more actions, and when you do finally get the battles, it actually does feel more epic. Now, I'm going to talk more about the performances. I haven't talked about a lot about the performances yet. Like I've talked about Chalamet, like I've talked about Timothy Chalamet, but the other performances are all good here. Like the other best performance of this movie was easily Zendaya here, who delivered an amazing performance as Shani. Shani, like the girl we saw like briefly in part one, we didn't see much of. Here we see a little more of her here, and she shines much more here than she did in part one. The first act that does focus on their love story adds depth to the events of the movie's end. Zendaya's portrayal transcends a typical love story. And now when it comes to her as an actress, now when she debuted in Spider-Man Homecoming, as much as I'm not a fan of her MJ in the MCU Spider-Man movies, I hate to say that, guys, but then The Greatest Showman happened, and I was like, huh, okay, I liked her in that movie. I can't wait to see what else she does. So, aside from that Spider-Man stuff, like, most of what I've seen so far are the Dune movies. I know she was that fake Lola imposter in Spacecraft: A Failed Legacy. And it has another upcoming film next month called Challengers, which actually I'm interested in checking out. So thankfully, like after Homecoming, Zendaya's improved a lot. And the film does feel so much inspired by the Middle Eastern culture in terms of the language, the clothings, the movements, and the beliefs most of the characters would follow. And when it comes to the score of the movie, Hans Zimmer's music, it gets perfectly composed, and I like how in a lot of the fight scenes, like in the fight scenes, there's actually, believe it or not, there's no music in the background. It makes the whole tension point towards like the fight movements that increases the nervousness and tense vibe. Yeah, that's the good stuff I like there. So yeah, that's why it's still a good movie. The visuals are great, the score's great, especially when they don't play the score in the fight scenes, it makes it more realistic. The performances are great. You connect to the characters a little more in here, but the thing is, with that being said though, you want to know why I don't think it's as good as part one? Here are my problems, and here's exactly why I prefer part one. Number one biggest mistake here, it's nearly 3 hours long. Like, the whole runtime just causes some unneeded dialogues that don't really support the plot. Yes, guys, I'm sorry. I don't think this movie needed to be 3 hours long. If it's just going to end on an Infinity War-style cliffhanger that I'll get to in a bit, like every middle of a trilogy has to nowadays. Like ever since, I love Infinity War, but movies need to stop trying to be Infinity. Every, middle of a trilogy or new cliffhanger sequel needs to stop trying to be Infinity War every time now. Fast X did it last year. Across the Spider-Verse did it, but I loved Across the Spider-Verse. First, that was actually a good movie. Fast X is not. Fast X already seems like a shitty movie. And now this movie did it. And clearly, apparently that's how the book ends, but they clearly made a much more tragic ending on purpose so they could make Doom Messiah. I wish part 2 would be rated R as well, so that we could have some gore and stuff be presented in the film, especially with Austin Butler scenes. And part 2 had the perfect chance because of all the fight sequences. And especially Austin Butler's fight sequences that were epic sequences that were shot in black and white. I liked the black and white style. I liked the black and white style of the movie. And the scene, not the movie, guys. The black and white scene in the arena, but it's clearly reason they shot in black and white was so the movie wouldn't be rated R. And they did lower some of the seriousness in some scenes, even though there's a little more humor this time around. They lowered it a bit. It's like, Javier Bardem's character Stigler cracks most of the jokes. Like Stigler actually seemed pretty badass in the first film, but they just resumed him. They just toned him down to make him more humorous here with the little prophecy stuff and religious stuff here. And then, of course, with the new cast members, like, one of the cast members is from the first film, but there's two new cast members, like, I did like Florence Pugh's performance as Princess Ireland, and Christopher Walken did good as the Emperor, but the problem is, these two just, honestly, I felt like had nothing to do. And especially, like, Stellan Skarsgård actually seemed like an intimidating villain in part one, but in this movie, Stellan Skarsgård gets nothing to fucking do except basically makes... The three just basically kind of make speeches in most of their scenes. Stellan Skarsgård in particular, most of the scenes we see of him in this movie, he's just hung on life support strings like Pinocchio, and then being dipped in a bathtub butt-ass naked. And yes, I'm gonna get a little bit into rant qualities with the bad qualities, but it's just be known, guys, it's still not a rant video. And when we get to the final battle, yep, the final battle is epic. But even though the final battle is epic, some scenes were wasted potential. Like, how the finale goes is once Paul has regained consciousness from the tree of life, Southern Freeman leaders then hope for Paul to challenge Stuttgart for leadership, but Paul decides not to. But Paul is going to denounce this because now, tragically, he has accepted his messianic destiny. And Paul now declares himself the Lisan al-Gaib, and now he has full power of the Freeman, and now challenges the Emperor, who arrives now on Arrakis with Ireland, Moaim, and his Sardaukar troops. Paul then interrupts the Emperor's confrontation with the Baron, and he launches some warheads at Arrakis' stronghold fortresses. And then the Freemen ride on the Sandworms. They overpower Sardaukar forces. They breach Arrakis' defenses. And then this part right here. Gurney finds Rabban and slays him. Too quick. That there, guys, like, that whole scene was one of my biggest pet peeves with the finale. Like, you actually have Bautista and Brolin about to actually face off in a scene, so you think it would be like you'd finally get to see it, be the closest thing you'd finally get to see to a fight between Thanos and Drax. We don't get to see much of that, and after like 6 seconds, he just slits Rabban's throat. He's like, just completes his little revenge quote, and then Rabban's dead. Like, too fucking quick. There could have been more of a fight between them. But no, they had to make it a little more quicker. It did not need to be that short. Then Paul goes into Arrakis. He goes to the throne room. And then, of course, easily just kills Stellan Skarsgård's character, because Stellan Skarsgård had nothing to do in this film. Doesn't put up much of a fight, just lies there. Paul walks up, stabs him, and then he's dead. And then we cut to a bunch of ants crawling on his dead face in the middle of the desert. Yeah, when I watch an epic from Denis Villeneuve, I totally want to see a scene of ants crawling on a dead guy's face. Totally want to see that. What was the point of that shot? Then of course, after Paul kills Baron, he then orders the Emperor and the others to be transported to the Residency, and threatens he's going to destroy the planetary spice forever with all those remaining stockpiles he has. But he won't if the Emperor gives up the throne to him. But then Austin Butler's character arrives, and he challenges Paul to a duel as the Emperor's champion. And I liked this whole scene right here. And I actually liked this fight scene was not quick. We actually get a few minutes of them fighting. They fight, then Austin Butler's character briefly stabs Paul, but Paul walks up, limps over to Austin Butler's character, and grabs Austin Butler's character's knife, and it's like going a bit through Paul's hand, stabs Austin Butler's character, wins the duel. Then after Austin Butler's character is killed, Princess Ireland pretty much immediately surrenders, consents that she'll marry Paul, and the Emperor is now forced to give in to Paul's ultimatum and has to kneel before his signet ring. But of course, this makes Chani furious that he chose Ireland instead of her. She leaves the Residency and pretty much goes on a sandworm to leave. Then above Arrakis, we find out that spaceships are like the Freemen are telling him, there's some spaceships that won't accept your ascendancy. Paul pretty much orders his Freeman army to lead them to paradise, or in his own words, or kind of in his own words, kill them. Yeah, lead them to paradise as in actually sentence them to death for not accepting it. And then Jessica and Leia reflect that it's the beginning of the Holy War, and with the last shot we see is Chani just Chani's angry face, mounting a sandworm, and the movie's over. That's how the movie ends. So, yeah. While I still enjoy the film, but there was almost some rant-worthy problems with the finale. Almost caused the movie some rant-worthy problems. Even if it was still a pretty good film. Like, I'm sorry, like, I get this is how the novel ends. I never read the novel, but I found out the plot of the novel. So I was waiting, like, but... And then I found out Dennis was going to make the ending more tragic. And I get this is how the novel ends, and people want to criticize me for hating the downer ending. Because, the reason why, because, honestly, if Paul was going to get revenge for his family's death, but he decides to become kind of the bad guy, it just made the whole journey set up in part 1 just mean fucking nothing. And it was all a lie because pretty much Paul ended up joining the dark side. So the whole part 1 buildup was all a lie. Because, like, Paul and his mom are now pretty much the villains. Paul kills a bunch of planets who don't accept him being the new ruler. And the other problem, like, get this, guys. Dune Messiah obviously will happen. They'll greenlight it, but don't expect it to happen right away. Because Denis Villeneuve has said it himself. The Messiah won't happen for a while because he wants to do other things. He wants to do another movie. So don't expect Messiah to happen quick if it does, like this movie quickly got a release date. And just by apparently how that Messiah book apparently also ends, apparently that also ends with the leads dying, because then again, guys, I can bet you, like, with Messiah's already also not pleasant ending, Denis Villeneuve made this ending more tragic. He could probably make Messiah's ending even more tragic. Because that's every franchise nowadays. The main characters have to always die. Like, it all started with this. Michael Corleone and his daughter. Guess what? Godfather 3, they both fucking die at the end. Newt Hicks Bishop died in the beginning of Alien 3, and then Ellen Ripley fucking dies at the very end. For no reason. Anne Lewis died in RoboCop 3, the most shitty RoboCop movie. Whistler died a second time in Blade Trinity. Even though he died in the first film, he turned out to have survived, and he came back at Blade 2, but he fucking died again anyways. For good. Han Solo died in The Force Awakens. Luke Skywalker died in The Last Jedi. Because Carrie Fisher died in real life in 2016, Leia died in The Rise of Skywalker. Then in the MCU as well, like it started around the end of Phase 3. Gamora, Loki, Heimdall, Vision, they all died in Avengers Infinity War. Natasha Romanoff and Tony Stark both died in Avengers Endgame. Aunt May, like, younger Aunt May died in Spider-Man No Way Home, and then Peter Parker ended up losing all his friends, so even Peter Parker couldn't get a happy ending. Then, like, the newer Marvel films, Wanda Maximoff dies in the Multiverse of Madness. Jane Foster gets cancer, somehow becomes a Mary Sue, seems to show no problem, like, seems to be perfectly fine, but just fucking dies anyway in Thor Woken Blunder. Because Chadwick Boseman died in real life, T'Challa apparently dies in the beginning of Wakanda Forever, and then Kevin Feige makes Chadwick's death the plot of the sequel to make more money. Then Dewey dies in Scream 5, Maria Hill apparently dies in the shitty Secret Invasion show, half of everybody from the first Independence Day up to the ending with President Whitmore all fucking died in Independence Day Resurgence, Hector Barbosa died in Pirates of the Caribbean Dead Man Tell Tales, Rebecca Ferguson's character in the Mission Impossible films apparently dies in Dead Reckoning. I could go on and on. Just basically, everybody in Hollywood dies. I didn't say anybody died in this movie because they didn't, but apparently that's how the Messiah book ends, and I can bet you Denis Villeneuve could probably make that book ending even more of a tragic one. Even more of a tragic death of the characters. So, yeah, that's typical Hollywood. There's no happy endings in a franchise, or everybody just fucking dies. I could go on and on about that. That's why I'm not too excited for Messiah. So, Denis Villeneuve making a more tragic ending, guess what, dude? That's typical nowadays. But other than those problems, sorry I went on a little rant quality right there, guys, but there was the bad qualities, I have to say. Those bad qualities that kind of ticked me off a little bit. Dune Part 2 is still a good movie, even if I had some problems with it. I still enjoyed it, and it's by no means terrible. So yeah, there's my thoughts. So in the end, guys, Dune Part 2 is totally still worth buying for fans of the book, and Part 1, who are ready to see the story expand after 3 years of waiting for that to happen, and finally get to see the battle on screen. Anyways, guys, that's it for my view of Dune Part 2, and if you're wondering how I'm going to rate Dune Part 2, here's how I'm going to rate this movie. So overall, if you are a fan of Dennis, Part 1, and the Dune books in general, you're totally going to be satisfied with Part 2, and it's definitely worth seeing in theaters and adding to your collection. And if you're wondering how I'm going to rank Dune Part 2, I'm going to give Dune Part 2 an 8 out of 10. And there we go, guys. That's it for my review of Dune Part 2. So, I know people are going to disagree with what I have to say. They're going to try to say, you didn't understand the whole point of the movie. You probably hated the movie. No, I just said I like the movie, and I said my score is an 8 out of 10. I didn't say I hated it. I just had some problems with it that just made me like Dune Part 1 a little better. I still liked it. May not be my favorite movie of the year, but it's one of my favorites of the year. But I would rather be honest. I'd rather be honest with what I say. I'm not just going to copy every single person's opinion. Right? I still like Dune Part 2. But let me know in the comments below what you thought of Dune Part 2, the score you would give it, in your opinion. And until then, guys, that'll be it for this review. Thank you all for watching. If you like this, want to see more, and don't forget to like, subscribe to Don G. Corleone.